Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime, here at my next Avatar weekly discussion topic. This one's going to be all about Sokka, and this topic has been absolutely one of the most requested ones that I do. I had a good few people on Tumblr request it, and then it's kind of one of those ones where like a few people have mentioned a couple of characters, and it's been like Zuko, someone, and Sokka. Like, there's been a lot of and Sokkas, and I've just kind of maybe done some other characters before him, but he absolutely has been requested by a lot of people, so I'm pretty excited to do this video today. So let's just jump straight into Sokka, the main non-bender character in Avatar The Last Airbender, and probably like the most notable like non-bender character in like the entire kind of universe that we've learned about so far. He is a really important character, again absolutely a fan favorite, and has some really good development, and that's really interesting for a character who is a non-bender, because, you know, obviously as hardcore Avatar fans we all know that like the show, as much as the bending and stuff like that is cool, it's all about the characters and the plot and how amazing that is, and then the bending is just a bonus. But, you know, on the outside, kind of just coming into the show, you think like, oh cool, look at all this bending, that's kind of what gets you into it, how cool the animation is with the bending. And so you're kind of like, okay, Aang's interesting, he can at some point bend all four. Katara's a water bender, Zuko's a fire bender, you know, Toph comes on board as an earth bender, and Sokka's just there like, okay, cool, he's got a boomerang. But then he actually turns out to be a really interesting character, and they kind of use the fact that, like, initially he's not as good as the rest of them as a kind of arc for him to go from being the guy who wants and thinks he's like an amazing warrior to actually becoming an amazing warrior and leader. And that is a really interesting thing about his character, and that he does have that really solid arc that's one of the most easiest ones to point out. It's not a complex arc like Zuko, and he maybe doesn't have the same kind of ups and downs as like Aang's arc, but it's just a really solid kind of, you know, kind of becoming a man arc type thing that he has, becoming the person he always wanted to be, obviously very much inspired by his father and kind of making his father proud. It's really well done. But we'll discuss more of the character stuff later on, as I seem to always do. Let's start off with how kind of powerful he is, what his skills are. In terms of combat skills, by the end of the series, and I suppose going a little bit into what we know about him in Korra, he very much is, you know, a kind of strong kind of military leader, primarily focusing on, you know, strong tactics, clever plans. But when it comes down to it, he is actually a kind of basically a master swordsman. He's not on the same level as Piandao, as Zuko even, in terms of just sword skills. He makes up for that with the other skills that he has, how intelligent he is, how he uses the battlefield to his advantage, the terrain to his advantage, and so on. That's how he can fight more on an even playing field with those characters. The comics like sword bending show this very perfectly, in that Zuko and Sokka have loads of sparring duels during like basically just after like the Western Air Temple episode and stuff like that, while they're as a group kind of resting for a bit, and Zuko wins every single match because he is just outright a better swordsman when they're just fighting on like flat ground basically. But Sokka, I think, would have the advantage if they kind of had like any sort of terrain there, because like he showed in this fight against Piandao, he's very resourceful, and that's a key thing about his character. And that, I suppose, plus the fact that he uses some more kind of unconventional weapons, you know, his trademark boomerang, that fits his personality in that he can throw it straight at you, he can throw it kind of past you and then have it come back around and hit you on the back of the head, as he often does. And then he's also pretty good with machinery. Like he can very quickly adapt to other things and kind of use them fairly well. And I suppose we can assume when he got older he did sort of learn how to use other weapons and more about that. But just a very effective kind of combatant, especially towards the end of the series. Towards the start he's not particularly effective, though he is still very intelligent. And that is, as I said, his arc. It's him gradually becoming more and more confident in battle, developing his skills. Initially just, you know, being really effective with the tactics and the boomerang, and the club that he sort of uses, and then towards the end of the series, the sword gives him like a really good talent that he can actually really play an active role in the battles and fight alongside the Benders. So there's that. And like there are some notable kind of fights for him, and that during the events of the Search comic, he actually, like, it's kind of an off-screen fight for the most part, but while like Zuko is talking to Ki and they're kind of worried that Azula's gone after the family, Sokka basically fights Azula one-on-one on the roof of the house and doesn't get like horribly injured. Like I assume he just barely stays in the fight, but the fact that he can stay somewhat in a fight against Azula without his sword and just his boomerang, stuff like that, is pretty telling about how much better he has become over the course of the series, and even from what we know. And so he is very strong. Like, the most obvious person to compare him to is probably Suki in terms of like the other non-bender kind of on the team, in terms of them both being warriors. And I think overall, like, Suki is probably the more like skilled, kind of, as I said, just in like flat ground, no terrain. Like Suki's skills with all her weaponry, her fans, her katana, shield, that sort of thing, probably do just about beat out Sokka's, just skill with a sword and stuff like that. But again, I think he, in terrain and using his cleverness to his advantage, probably would give him the advantage over Suki. But that's what makes their relationship quite good, in that Suki is the more skilled one, but Sokka's the more intelligent one, and so together on the battlefield they make a really amazing pairing. Though we don't really get to see them fight side by side so much and see that. I would actually hope that happens at some point in one of the comics, and we potentially get to see just the two of them fighting really amazingly well together. But I suppose where we are in the comics right now is actually interesting, because Sokka doesn't have his space sword. This obviously was lost during the final battle in ATLA, but we know that he potentially gets it back. Some of that old friends poster with Sokka kind of shows that he has it, or a very similar sword. So at some point he maybe finds it, because right now in the comics I feel that he has taken on a much more kind of comedic role, and he hasn't been as important to the plot. Part of that, I think, is because without the sword he doesn't quite have the ability to fight as well as the others right now. But as I said, that scene with Azula, he didn't have a sword either, and he was pretty effective there. But in addition to that, it is his kind of good knowledge over machinery and stuff like that allows him to kind of lead that airship team to victory, doing what he needs to do, taking down the ship from the inside. And he's the one who obviously teaches Suki stuff like how to kind of engineer the airship to kind of fly it the way she does when she arrives back to save them. So he definitely has a great arc in terms of just his combat abilities going up. And the episode with Piandao being the most notable example of that, him actively doing the training and Piandao seeing that he's a different type of warrior than like himself and I suppose Zuko, the other person he trained, in that he may not have the just flat out amazing skills with a sword. He's decent, he's good, but what makes him better is his ability to think on his feet, think outside the box and stuff like that. So yeah, combat wise he is very good, and he very much, in terms of the role he plays on Team Avatar, he is essential to the group, not just necessarily in terms of his combat abilities and what he brings in terms of leadership. The team very much appreciates him for the humor he brings to the team. He is that, as much as he is a warrior by the end of the series, he's not adverse to kind of making a little bit of fun of himself and being the kind of more comedic member of the team. And the others really appreciate him for that, which is why when he leaves and is gone with a lot of training, the team are kind of lost a little bit. Like they don't really have someone to joke around with so much. Because he adds so much liveliness to the group just in terms of his personality. But in terms of them adventuring and stuff like that, he is the idea guy. He has constantly been the one with the tactics of Team Avatar. Aang is the leader in terms of his role as the Avatar. He just his title, his ultimate power eventually, like the fact that the team is named after him, makes him, I suppose, the overall leader. Katara will be like the emotional kind of leader of the group. When things get down, she's the one to bring them up. But it's Sokka who is, I suppose, the kind of battle leader. When it really comes down to it, he's the one kind of telling everyone what to do. They're, at times they're better fighters than him, and he can tell them how to effectively use that. The most notable example of this is obviously when, after a shaky start, he does take on his leadership role at the first battle to apparently take out Ozai when they attack the coast of the Fire Nation. It obviously doesn't end up working well, but he does effectively take over the leadership role from Hakoda and lead the charge effectively and inspiring all the men. So like there's moments like that, and then just overall like plans, like the way he comes up with a plan to take out the drill, and that like he is not the most useful himself in terms of the fight during the drill episode, but in terms of being the one to come up with a plan, he wins the day for Team Avatar. And it's just things like that that make him an essential character to the series. Just that combination of cleverness and then the humorous side of him, and that he can also be the silliest character on screen as well as the smartest, and that the whole his intrigue and things kind of gets the better of him sometimes. He's just like, hey, look, a cactus, and he just chops it and drinks some of it, and ends up kind of drugged out for basically the entire episode. So he has these moments, and that just makes him very endearing as a character, and it kind of makes you kind of like realize like, okay, that's why like characters like Suki Yue kind of really took a liking to him, and that he wasn't just a serious warrior guy, that there was this kind of like, yeah, I'm kind of an idiot kind of side of him as well. But yeah, let's get into his kind of role as the series progresses. As I said, he does start off as this guy who thinks he is the best warrior in the village. He thinks he's a really good warrior, so much so that he's teaching the kids of the village how to be warriors too. But when Zuko arrives, and this is like Zuko at his earliest in the series, the least skilled he is, and Zuko just mops the floor with him. Sokka doesn't really have a chance. It's just the kind of randomness of the boomerang coming back and hitting Zuko that is the only hit that Sokka gets in. But otherwise, he is shown to be quite inept at the start, and very much kind of more talk than action in terms of the way he feels. But it comes from a place of just the fact that he really is the only kind of male in his village around that age. Everyone else left is either super young kids or super old. All the warriors are gone, including his father. There's no one to really teach him more warrior skills. And he's at the age when he should be going through all these kind of rites and rituals to become a warrior and get thought. But because of the war, he's kind of kept from doing that. So it adds to him thinking he's better than he actually is, and needing to go on this journey with Aang to improve his skills. And on the other side of things, it also means that he kind of grew up and was very sexist at the start towards his sister and kind of women warriors in general, as seen in the first episode with Suki, the Warriors of Kyoshi. In that, I like what they do with this, in that you never hate Sokka for being this way, because you understand where it comes from. He has basically been the only like male of kind of active age in his village for such a long time when his father left, that he's kind of had to take on that role as like the only warrior in the village, and being around like Katara and all these other characters who have been doing like the other stuff while he's been sort of doing the warrior stuff. You understand where that sort of comes from, not having male role models in his life. But when you get to the episodes with Suki, it's very quickly that it just breaks down. Like, she beats him, and when they have their kind of sparring match, he's a little bit, his pride is hurt, he goes away for a while, but instantly comes straight back and is just like, yeah, you're better than me, I'm sorry for what I said earlier on. And goes as far as to actually just be like, I want you to train me. And like that's a big show of respect there, and it's showing you that the sexism isn't this like huge thing that's just fundamentally built into his character that's going to take a long time to get over. He basically just gets over it there. It's just like, she's better than me, I need to train from people to become a warrior, my father's not around, you're good, teach me. And I suppose the fact that it is such a quick turnaround, and he turns out to be, such an intelligent person, takes on some of this stuff fairly easily, and isn't just extremely prideful, that makes Suki actually like him, kind of fall for him. And that's why that relationship is so interesting, in that they are both warriors. Suki is at a much more advanced stage than Sokka is, but she helps him get to that level. But in terms of the whole with Suki, I'm a warrior, but I'm a girl too. The girl side comes out and she kind of falls for Sokka a bit, and teaching him is a good thing for her. And it's just really nicely done how that comes together, that he very much, when they have to leave, he inspires Suki to play a more active role in the world. He inspires her to go off and kind of join the Bossing Say war relief effort and help everyone, which is why she is where she is in the Serpent's Pass when they meet her again. But between obviously their next meetings, obviously Sokka starts a relationship with Yue. And this is really interesting, the roles that the kind of love interest for Sokka play in his kind of character arc, in that he obviously meets Suki first and is like a warrior, and he learns skills from her and becomes a better warrior because of that, and kind of gains his first kind of romantic moment with Suki. Then when it comes to Yue, he likes her straight away, and obviously then it comes around to the fact that he's calling out like Han for being sexist towards Yue and like not treating her correctly. So it's a big kind of role reversal here, and he's basically asked to protect Yue during the big battle that's happening, and then he basically is put in this position where Yue is the only one who can save the ocean spirit, moon spirit. She's the only one who can save the moon spirit, and she doesn't die. She just changes form and kind of becomes the moon spirit herself. But Yue the human is gone, and he sees this as a complete failure, that he can't protect the people he cares about. Hence why when he meets up with Suki again, he is so overprotective of her, because he feels like he completely failed with Yue. And I would really like it if we got a little bit more of a scene where perhaps Sokka talks to Suki about Yue. You get a little bit of it in the Serpent's Pass, but not fully. And it's just very nicely done. And the thing with what makes his relationship with Suki so good is that she doesn't get really annoyed with him for like being this way, in that she just basically says, you know, like without saying as much, you know, like, okay, I appreciate that you're wanting to protect me, but I can look after myself. You know that I trained you to be a better warrior. I'm still better than you right now. I'm the one who can more protect you. And she just very clearly says that to him, and he kind of takes it to heart, and he does become less protective of her, but he still obviously is a protective character, and it's just nicely done in that way. And then, speaking of him also being protective, there are moments where he's very protective of Katara as his sister. You get that in the comics. The Search very much shows the good relationship he has with Katara, that even though that they argue and fight a lot, he always is looking out for her, even if it's just a really subtle thing, like Katara falls asleep on the ground, he just puts a blanket over her. Like, stuff like that is quite nice. And then more kind of seriously, like when Aang burned Katara into the deserter, he comes in all like Big Brother style, like tackling Aang to the ground and just like, what did you do? Like, never do anything like this again. Like, it's a big moment, just showing that he is extremely protective of her in the end, and that works quite nicely in that sense. And yeah, just like obviously as the series progresses, you know, he does continue to take on this kind of role. Like you see him do a little bit of detective work during the whole Kyoshi episode, even though they play it more up for a kind of a joke when they're investigating that. But primarily, like early on, like it's weird in that like most of his character development in the first 2 seasons is actually in relation to his romance stuff, but they do it really well, which is a complete contrast to, say, Mako from Korra, who most of his like on-screen time is done in relation to his relationships, but they don't really develop him as a character through them. It's just romance drama. Whereas with Sokka, it's just like, no, him meeting Suki helped him to become a better warrior, and potentially, you know, opened Suki up to things as well. He very much had an impact on her. The thing with Yue very much played a role in his character for like the next like half a season, until Suki came back and kind of snapped him out of that, and then they effectively started a relationship, but realized that their paths that they were on had to go in different directions. and then obviously coming back together in the Boiling Rock, they just flat out started their relationship properly. And it's just this really nice thing that, like, by the time they meet up again, they are much more equal in episode 3, Suki and Sokka. In the sense of, like, Suki, I think, still overall is the more skilled, but Sokka's leadership skills, his skills with a sword at this point, make him much more on par with Suki. In a different sense, in that, like, Suki is like the leader of the Kyoshi Warriors, but I do think Sokka overall is a better leader, because just the fact that he could inspire Suki to want to do something shows that, I think. So there's that, and then just like stuff like the friendship he starts with Zuko, the fact that, you know, they're much closer in age than, like, say, compared to him and Katara and him and Aang. And you can just talk to Zuko about relationships and stuff like that. So that's a really interesting friendship. His kind of brotherly relationship, in that they eventually become brother-in-law relationship with Aang, is interesting. And it's the silliness side of Sokka is kind of a bit more played up there. Like, some of Sokka's more kind of crazy ideas and stuff like that, Aang definitely gets on board with them because he's such a fun-loving character. So he adds some really interesting stuff a bit to all of the characters. And even the role he plays with Toph is very much like a big brother as well. Like, that's actually a really nice relationship. The main scene I would cite would be in The Runaway, where he's kind of talking to Toph about his own relationship with Katara and stuff like that, and it really helps kind of Toph to get a better insight into who Katara is and why she is the way she is, and help her better understand who Katara is. And it's just a scene that shows that even though Sokka at times, like, is on the opposite side of Katara, he does know exactly who she is, and he can tell that to Toph and act as, you know, he is the older one compared to Toph, and that comes through. The other side of things is that at times Sokka kind of lost sight a bit of what their ultimate goal was. The best episode to cite for this is The Painted Lady, in that ultimately, when you look back at the entire series, the reason the gang were successful is that because the people they met along their way, they became friends with them. And when the time came for it, these friends came back and helped them, whether it be coming back in a war or coming back in a really strong moment. And that is kind of, I think, kind of Katara's style of doing things. That so when you come to the Painted Lady and Katara really wants to help this town village, but Sokka just wants to move on, it's this interesting conflict between brother and sister, in the sense of, like, okay, they're on a tight schedule, yes, they should be going on and attacking the greater goal, but these little things are the things that really show Team Avatar as the heroes that they are. That they're not just focusing on taking out Ozai and ending things that way, that they're willing to help people along the way. And that style of doing things is kind of what got them the success that they got. Like, if they didn't stay in Kyoshi and help Suki, they wouldn't have her as an ally in the end. You know, if they didn't stand up in various places throughout the series, like, they wouldn't have the certain amount of friends they have. If they didn't fight at the Southern Air Temple, they wouldn't have a lot of the kind of technological support that they got in the final episodes. So, you know, it's an important thing. And so, you know, the line from Katara, you know, I will never ever turn my back on the people who need me, is that, like, that's Katara's kind of key line. But he kind of turns that into his line, that, okay, and I'll never turn my back on you. I'll always look out for you. And that was really nice. That even if she gets herself into a little bit of a mess with her eagerness to help people, he'll always be there to back her up. And it was just a nice little bit of development for Sokka to show that he does care about the people around him. It's just sometimes he loses sight of that in the whole ideas, thinking too hard about things. The schedule, in that case, is what he focuses too heavily on. But it is really nicely done. But and like, by the end of the series, Sokka has led a couple of battles. He's obviously took over from Makoto at that big battle in the middle of Book 3. That's a really important moment for him, where he just fully becomes the leader that he was kind of meant to be. And you can see the potential for him to really, become the successor to Hakoda, in many ways surpass him almost. And so when we eventually find out that he does kind of become the chief of the Southern Water Tribe at a certain point, and then becomes the Southern Water Tribe representative on the council, it makes complete sense that he was the guy to think enough about these things, so it would make sense for him to take on that role. And just knowing that he became that is interesting. That, like, I don't think it was ever his goal. Like, it wasn't the whole, like, One Piece type thing, like Luffy, I want to be the king of the pirates. That Sokka's goal at the start wasn't, I want to be the next chief of the Water Tribe. But he became that anyway because he became the person that role was suited to. And that really kind of fits his character. And then him taking on, I suppose, a more political role in Republic City, a place that their group helped to really found with Yu Dao, is definitely important. Now, when exactly this happens, I think the next comic series after Smoke and Shadow is probably going to be a pretty important one for Sokka, in the sense of it'll be Katara and Sokka returning to the Water Tribe. At least that's what we think the next series is about. No one else has really any other ideas, so it kind of has to be that way. But it's going to be them returning to the Southern Water Tribe for the first time since the war ended. That's going to be very important because they're going to be heroes of the world, but they've been gone from their hometown for a while, and they don't know how peacetime has affected their hometown. So it'll be interesting to see what roles they take up. Like, is Sokka immediately kind of like considered like next in line to be the chief? Does Hakoda want to retire almost immediately? That sort of thing. And then, like, what role does Katara take up? It's really, really interesting. Like, where does his relationship with Suki goes? Because ultimately, we don't know a lot about Sokka, even in terms of Korra times. We know that by the time Korra starts, Sokka has died, though we don't know when exactly that happened. The only other things we know are that he was alive during the Yukon incident as the Water Tribe representative on the council for the Southern Water Tribe, and that at some point after that, when Korra was very young, he was one of the people who helped defeat the Red Lotus and capture them to help protect Korra. Now, a lot of people speculate that perhaps he died during this incident, going up against such powerful benders, but I think they would have mentioned that. Like, that's a very important thing that would have potentially happened, but they don't seem to mention that. Perhaps he just died at a young age. We don't know if he and Suki ever married, if Suki was even the one he stayed with for a long time, or if he had any kids. I'm not really sure. That's definitely an interesting one going forward to see in the comics, like where Suki and Sokka's relationship actually goes. I do think it's a very important relationship for both characters, in that I think it's a relationship that came together naturally. Where they are in the comics right now is just that they do have to spend a lot of time apart because of Suki's role as like Zuko's bodyguard, and then Sokka helping Team Avatar and now needing to return to his home. So I definitely want to see moments where they do kind of get together and do stuff together, but for the most part, like, they've done a good job at showing you how the two of them kind of like light up when they're around each other, even though they realistically don't spend that much time around each other. But yeah, I suppose we're coming towards the end of the video here. I really do like Sokka as a character. He has a very clear and to the point arc, but it works as it goes through the series. It's never a huge focus in the same way that, like, Zuko's constant back and forth, his decision making is brought up as the series goes along, or Aang's kind of responsibilities with being the Avatar is brought up. But it is an ever-present thing that you can see if you really heavily look at his character as the series progresses. He gradually becomes stronger in battle as they go through each engagement. He becomes a better on-field, tactician. He becomes more skilled with, like, his boomerang, just acting in combat. He then gains the really important skill of using a sword, and I think most importantly of all, he becomes a really strong leader, and I suppose a better person as well by the end of the series. It's a very notable growth path between episode 1 and him in episode 321. in that like he's the guy who couldn't even do anything against Zuko, and he only got in like a lucky hit, compared to the guy who is saving Toph. You know, he's throwing his sword, throwing his boomerang, taking down firebenders, Sozin's comet assisted firebenders left, right, and center while hanging off the side of an airship. Like, it's a really notable arc for him. So, amazing character, and I'm sure there'll be much more to come as we go through the comics and he becomes more of a focus. So, that's been the end of the video. In the comments, let me know what you want the next discussion video to be about. But other than that, thanks for listening to this video, and bye.